I've done quite a few build videos using this case, and then I realized I've never done a complete review on it. So the question is, do I love it, which is why I've used it a lot, or do I hate it, which is why I haven't done a review on it? Hey, what's going on YouTube? I'm Danny with Danny's Tech Channel. Today I'm taking a look at the Cooler Master Masterbox MB311L ARGB case. This is a Micro-ATX chassis. It's similar to the MB320L, but that's the non-airflow model with the dark mirror front panel. This is the mesh front panel. This case comes in at $74.99 USD, and actually it's on sale over on Newegg right now, so if you want to go and get this for less than 75 bucks, check out the link below. And one of the cool features about the case is it comes with two RGB fans in the front that you can dial in and choose the color that you want. But let's take a look at the case, do a walk around of it, and I'll give you all the features that it has. So it's a tempered glass side panel, and it can house a Micro-ATX motherboard or a Mini ITX motherboard. Those are the only two that it supports. It has two top, side, and bottom pass-throughs for cable management. There's a 120mm fan mount on the back. It cannot fit a 140. This is a 120mm only. And then it's got two 2.5-inch drive bays on the bottom of the case. You can either mount hard drives on there or SSDs, your choice. Moving on to the front of the case, like I said at the beginning, it has two SickleFlow PWM pre-installed RGB fans on it, and they are ARGB, so they're fully controllable. You can fit up to 3 120mm fans or 2 140mm fans on the front. And as far as radiators go, you can fit a 240mm or a 280mm radiator also. Now, if you want to go smaller and do a 140 or a 120, that'll work too. The last feature on the front of the case is this front panel is mesh, like I had said, but it also pops off quick release, and there's nothing attached to it like the top I/O, so you just snap it off and it comes right off the case. This makes blowing the dust off that front panel a breeze. Moving on to the cable management side, the cables that you have are pretty simplistic. You have an HD audio connector, a USB 3.0 connector, an entire front panel connector, which everything is nicely tucked together. And then it comes with a splitter for the ARGB to be able to connect your front fans. And you can connect other fans as well to that. It has extra space for it. There's two 3.5-inch hard drive bays and two 2.5-inch drive mounts on the back. Now the hard drive cage is also removable as well to get extra space for a big power supply if you need that. On the top, it has a reset button, headphone, microphone jack, these are two separate ports, a power button, two USB 3.0 headers, and a hard disk drive light. So when your drive is operating, it's flashing that little light. And then finally, there's a magnetic dust filter on the top that's easily removable. Now I want to keep this video short and sweet just to get the information across to you, but if you'd like, check out this quick montage of throwing the build together and a little bit of B-roll of the finished product. Okay, now that you saw how the computer came together, let's talk about my build notes, and I'll give you everything that happened to me while I was doing the build. The very first thing I liked about the case is the rather large motherboard cutout that it has. By leaving that open in the back there, some cases I've used have very small motherboard cutouts, and it's hard to access any kind of CPU cooler or anything like that. Cooler Master has thought ahead in doing this, knowing that people want to upgrade to a liquid cooler. As you can see, I have my EK water block AIO in here, and it looks great, it performs great, it actually fits really good too. But I didn't have to remove the motherboard from the case, and in some cases, that happens. Second thing I liked, the lip at the back of the case here near the IO shield makes carrying this thing around simple. Some cases I've carried, you kind of feel like they're uneven, the weight distribution is not good, and it's just hard to transport them. Either they're too large or they're awkwardly shaped. Having the lip on the back of this thing here makes this thing very easy to pick up and makes me feel like I can control the case when moving it. Another thing I really liked about the case is the daisy chainable RGB. Because it has that 3-pin connector cable that it comes with, you can connect that to your 2 front fans and you still have an extra connection left over after that. Speaking of things the case comes with, if your motherboard does not have an ARGB connector to it, that's those 3-pin connectors, that connector might not be on your motherboard. Well, with Cooler Master, you don't have to worry about that, because they give you a nice little RGB controller and it's SATA powered, which pretty much every power supply has now. All you have to do is plug the SATA hub in, plug in the RGB connector from the fans or from your splitter if that's what you're using, and there's a button on top of the hub that is really easy to operate. And another cool thing you can do, the case has a reset button on the top here. Like I said, you can turn that into your RGB button. So that's what I did with the case right now. You can actually push this and choose your light settings just based on the reset button. Now, I don't have a reset button anymore, but if I can control my RGB, it's worth it. Another one of my positives for this case is how long it is, and it can fit big graphics cards. You can fit graphics cards up to 344 millimeters in length. And the last thing that I really liked is the front IO is connected to the case, not the front panel. I've used a couple cases in the past that the front panel connector is actually connected to the front panel itself. That's fine if you never want to remove the panel, but for me, I like to take the panel off and clean it and dust it and everything like that and then snap it back on. This panel is real easy to remove. You do have to apply a little bit of force to pop it off, but once it's off, there's nothing else to disconnect or move out of the way or anything because the cables stay on the case. Good job, Cooler Master. Now that I've talked about the positives on the case, let's take a couple steps back and talk about some of the negatives that it has. First thing I don't like is the PCI expansion slots are punch-out slots. They don't have removable trays or anything. I feel like they could have added those. Would it have really cost that much money? I'm not sure, but to me, that's a negative. I like having the removable trays in the PCI slots. Now, the second thing I didn't like is a really big deal to me, and this may prevent you from wanting to use this case yourself. The distance between where the motherboard sits and the top of the case is very small and very tight. The radiator and fan together create a very tight space compared to just having fans. I found myself having to remove the radiator constantly to be able to plug all my connectors in, whether it be a fan header on the motherboard or the EPS power connector. I didn't plug any of that in before I installed the radiator. That was a mistake. Don't do that if you buy this case. If you do buy the case, install all your connectors and everything, then put the AIO into the case. The last thing I didn't like about the case, the bottom dust filter is really cheap. It has no plastic bracket to it. It's just a piece of mesh that slides into these little cover slots. Same thing with the PCI expansion slots. They could have spent the money on the filter and just done a nice little plastic surround and make it so that it can slide out easily. Another thing I looked at on the case, I wanted to do a lot of testing with it. I did some thermal testing. I usually don't do a lot of thermal testing with cases, but this one I've used so many times and I thought it was really interesting because I've put high-end components in this and I've put really low-end components. Check out these thermals. I did two different variations of this. I had the case as it's sitting now, and I had the case with a rear exhaust fan on here also. With no rear fan, I got 57C on the GPU and 67C on the CPU at 4.5 gigahertz under load. When the computer was at idle, it was at 26C on the GPU and 27C on the CPU. Now, I honestly didn't think putting the fan in there was gonna make really any difference, but it did. Adding the rear fan with load, the GPU was at 55C versus the 57C initially, and 64C for the CPU at 4.5 gigahertz again, versus the 67 initial under load. So I dropped 2 or 3 degrees on each test, and at idle, I was at 25C on the GPU and 26C on the CPU. If you ask me, the thermals for this thing are incredible. Now, obviously when I did the thermal testing, I had the glass on the side, I didn't leave that off. Also, to fill you in, my thermal testing software is Unigen Heaven for the GPU and Cinebench R23 for the CPU. I just wanted something that would put 100% load on each component and create the most heat I could possibly get. They worked out good. So if you're looking at the case for strictly an airflow standpoint, this is your go-to when it comes to Micro-ATX. I'd say this computer checks all the boxes. It's got great airflow, RGB, tempered glass, lots of cooling options, room for upgrades, and all of that comes in at a price point that's hard to argue with. I would definitely recommend this case to anyone that's looking for a Micro-ATX chassis. In fact, there isn't much competition in this segment except by Cooler Master themselves. So if you're thinking about getting this case, and now you have more information about it because of my build video, go out and get it for yourself today. Also, before I forget, if you didn't check out my last video, I created a Discord channel for DTC. You can click the link below and come on over to join our community and chat about tech, link up with people to game, or just post pics of your build, because I love seeing what you create too. I hope to see you there, and I'll catch you next time on Danny's Tech Channel.